In the early summer of 1942, the Pacific Ocean roared with the echoes of war. The United States, still reeling from the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor just 6 months earlier, faced the daunting challenge of halting the Japanese Empire's relentless expansion. This challenge culminated in one of the most pivotal clashes of World War II, the Battle of Midway. The Battle of Midway was not just a story of tactics and strategies, it was a tale of resilience, innovation, and courage. Nestled halfway between Asia and North America, Midway Atoll held little value as a speck of land. Yet, its strategic location made it a jewel worth fighting for. To the Japanese, capturing Midway meant expanding their defensive perimeter and solidifying control over the Pacific. For the Americans, it was a last line of defense, a point they could not afford to lose. In early May 1942, Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto devised an intricate plan to lure the American fleet into a trap. The Japanese fleet, superior in both size and experience, aimed to overwhelm and destroy the U.S. Navy's Pacific Fleet in a decisive blow. Yamamoto's plan depended on secrecy and surprise. However, unknown to the Japanese, U.S. cryptographers had cracked the Japanese naval code. By late May, American intelligence knew of the planned assault and prepared accordingly. The U.S. Navy, under the command of Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, scrambled to assemble a counterforce. Nimitz's fleet was outnumbered and outgunned, consisting primarily of 3 aircraft carriers, the USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and the hastily repaired USS Yorktown. In contrast, the Japanese brought 4 carriers, several battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. The odds were stacked against the Americans, but they had one critical advantage: the element of surprise. On June 3, 1942, the battle began. U.S. reconnaissance planes spotted Japanese ships approaching Midway, prompting American bombers to launch a hasty attack. Although this initial assault caused minimal damage, it set the stage for what was to come. The next day, June 4th, would become the turning point in the Pacific War. At dawn, the Japanese launched their attack on Midway Atoll. Waves of bombers rained destruction on the tiny island, but its defenders, a mix of Marines and Navy personnel, fought valiantly. While the Japanese focused on Midway, American carriers lay in wait, ready to strike. Around 7 a.m., American torpedo bombers took to the skies. Their mission was simple yet suicidal: target the Japanese carriers. Wave after wave of these brave pilots dove toward the enemy ships, dodging anti-aircraft fire and fighter planes. The Japanese Zero fighters tore through the torpedo squadrons, leaving behind a trail of burning wreckage. Of the 41 planes that attacked, only a handful returned. Yet their sacrifice was not in vain. As the Japanese carriers scrambled to defend against the torpedo bombers, their decks became chaotic. Aircraft were being refueled and rearmed for another strike on Midway. Fuel hoses snaked across the decks, bombs were scattered, and crews worked frantically. This was the moment the Americans had been waiting for. Shortly after 10 a.m., American dive bombers, led by Lieutenant Commander Clarence McCluskey, descended from the skies. These planes, flying high to avoid detection, caught the Japanese carriers completely off guard. Within minutes, 3 of Japan's prize carriers, the Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, were ablaze. Explosions tore through their decks, and towering columns of black smoke rose into the sky. The once mighty warships were reduced to floating infernos. The surviving Japanese carrier, Hiryu, launched a desperate counterattack, striking the USS Yorktown. Despite heroic efforts to save the ship, Yorktown eventually succumbed to its wounds. However, the Americans were not finished. Later that afternoon, dive bombers found and struck the Hiryu, sealing Japan's fate. By June 5th, the battle was effectively over. 4 Japanese carriers lay at the bottom of the Pacific, along with hundreds of aircraft and thousands of sailors. The U.S. victory at Midway was staggering. It marked the first major defeat of the Japanese Navy and shifted the momentum of the war in the Pacific. Never again would Japan regain the offensive. But the Battle of Midway was more than a military triumph. It was a testament to the power of intelligence, preparation, and sheer determination. Cryptographers like Joseph Rockefeller, who worked tirelessly to decode Japanese messages, proved that wars could be won not only on the battlefield, but also in the shadows. Pilots like George Gay, the sole survivor of Torpedo Squadron 8, exemplified the courage to face insurmountable odds. And leaders like Nimitz showed that even in the face of adversity, calm and calculated decisions could turn the tide. For the United States, the victory at Midway was a beacon of hope. It proved that the Japanese juggernaut was not invincible and that America's industrial and military might could rise to meet any challenge. For the Japanese, the loss was a bitter lesson in overconfidence and the perils of underestimating one's opponent. Today, the Battle of Midway is remembered as one of the greatest naval battles in history. It stands as a reminder that courage, strategy, and sacrifice can shape the course of events, even when the odds seem impossible. As the sun sets over the quiet waters of Midway Atoll, it whispers the tale of those who fought and fell, ensuring that their sacrifice will never be forgotten.